Hello everyone and welcome to the June meeting of the Public Service Innovation Network. My name is Jade O'Toole and I'm the Innovation Initiatives Manager on the Public Service Innovation team in the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform. So the topic for today's event is Innovating for Sustainability and the Circular Economy. So we're going to hear from three different perspectives on the circular economy and how different organisations are working to develop and promote the circular economy in Ireland. First up we have Joe Reilly, Programme Officer with the Environmental Protection Agency. Following Joe, then we'll have Eddie Conroy, County Architect with South Dublin County Council. And then finally, we'll have Aisling Folan, Creative Reuse Director with Recreate, a social enterprise that repurposes and provides art materials and educational supplies to schools and community groups for creative purposes. So to provide some context for today, economy strategy. So this was launched in December 2021 and the strategy provides a whole of government national policy framework to develop a circular economy in Ireland. This strategy seeks to contribute to Ireland's commitment to halve emissions by 2030 and to reach net zero by 2050. So our transition to a circular economy is an important part of the solution to tackle climate change. A circular economy seeks to reduce waste and keep resources and products in use for as long as possible through reuse, redesign, regeneration, repurposing and reimagining. It's a departure from our traditional take, make and waste model, and it's a move to a more sustainable consumption model where we reuse and repurpose our items. So the circular economy is not only important from the perspective of climate change and the positive environmental outcomes, it also has significant potential for innovation, growth and sustainable employment. And today's presentations will feature three projects which will demonstrate this. So we hope today's Innovation Network is an opportunity to learn more about the circular economy and how our public bodies and social enterprises are contributing to a thriving circular economy in Ireland. We already engage in many activities in the circular economy, such as donating to charity shops and purchasing from charity shops, remembering to bring our reusable coffee cup, and repairing our shoes instead of throwing them away. So we also hope that this event provides some inspiration on how we as citizens can continue to contribute to the circular economy and to reimagine and reuse the products that we already own. So first up, we have Joe Reilly. So Joe is Programme Officer with the Environmental Protection Agency, where he works on the Circular Economy Programme and manages the Green Enterprise Annual Circular Economy Innovation Funding Programme, which is what Joe is going to present on today. And it's a busy day for the EPA, so we're delighted that Joe could join us today to share this exciting project. So I'll hand over to you, Joe, if that's okay.
Hello all, we're just gone past 12 o'clock, so I think it's safe to say good afternoon. And I'd like to thank the organisers for giving me the opportunity here to give you an overview of Green Enterprise. And the timing is fairly perfect because next week we will be launching our 2022 call. So, sorry, no, I'm actually having, having technical issues there. So for my presentation today, I'll give an overview of the Circular Economy Programme, and then I'll talk about the Green Enterprise Innovation for a Circular Economy. So I will go through the call proposals, the application process, thematic areas, and then I will discuss previous and ongoing Green Enterprise projects. So just quickly, the Circular Economy Programme launched in December last year, so that is building on what was the National Waste Prevention Programme, and it's aligned to and supports the Waste Action Plan for a Circular Economy and the whole of government circular economy strategy. And there are four main pillars within the Circular Economy Programme, and under the Innovation and Demonstration pillar is where Green Enterprise Innovation for a Circular Economy sits. I always think it's worthwhile for us to take a step back and this, we often have to ask ourselves, why do we do this work and important work, and why we need a circular economy? And ultimately the drivers are limited resources, population growth, and increased demand for services. Ultimately, we're trying to maintain the value of products, materials and resources. Minimising waste generation is a key principle of the circular economy, and ultimately the fewer products we discard, the less materials we extract, the better for our environment. And there's a lot of resources on the circular economy. The Ellen MacArthur Foundation has numerous resources and publications, and ultimately their definition of a circular economy is: a circular economy is based on the principles of designing out waste and pollution, keeping products and materials in use, and regenerating natural systems. I put a snippet in here from last week. It's the RTE news snippet. You know, there's unfortunately a lot of doom and gloom around the environment and various different issues. The EPA today released its greenhouse gas projections. Again, it's quite unfortunately negative, but I hope by the end of the slides that I give here today that you can see that there is some positive news and some positive stories there to be told regards the circular economy. So the circular economy is the potential to enhance competitiveness and resilience for enterprises. Ultimately, we found, and numerous researchers found, that by having a circular economy principles or ethos within your business can lead to cost savings, new markets and employment, new business models, less reliance on imports, and that is, I suppose, there's huge focus on that, especially with our reliance on imports from countries, as you can see what's happening between Russia and Ukraine, and there's a lot of critical raw materials, and that's a huge issue. Waste prevention, as I said, is at the heart of the circular economy. Low carbon emissions it can result from having circular economy principles within your businesses, and ultimately increasing resource efficiency. So just an overview of the Green Enterprise Innovation for a Circular Economy Fund. So the fund, it's quite a substantial pot of money. It's 650,000 euro, and that is a max of 100,000 euro per grant award. So typically we would be funding around between 6 and 8 projects per year. Companies must be Irish registered, and just to note, they're subject to compliance with state de minimis rules. So ultimately, companies cannot have research funding of over 200,000 euro in a 3-year period. We're looking at projects between 50 and 100,000 euro, and ultimately, they're short and snappy projects we're looking for that would be completed within 18 months, and final reports and outputs fully completed within 24 months. The type of projects we're looking for are well thought out projects with clear objectives and approaches. They have to be relevant to the called thematic areas, which I'll explain shortly. We're looking for projects that can make a national impact regarding circular economy. Ultimately, any project needs technical expertise, and value for money is very important. The thematic areas I mentioned are in line with the circular economy thematic areas. So packaging, plastics, textiles, food, water and nutrients, construction and buildings, electronics and ICT, and battery and vehicles. So we're looking for projects within these thematic areas. I'm just highlighting this web page within the EPA website. So if you go to epa.ie, Circular Economy and Green Enterprise, if you have an interest to see what sort of ongoing and previous projects that we have, you can have a look at our webpage. And just on the left-hand side there, it gives the various different outputs of the projects. So I'm just going to zone in on some of the we've many interesting projects and a wide variety of projects. So this one is the Rediscovery Centre, and it's their paint project. Now, paint is a extremely problematic waste. Paint is managed as hazardous. It's really expensive to get rid of, and a lot of it is exported. So this project identified and implemented national best practice, and they expanded their paint reuse processing capacity at the Rediscovery Centre. So the Rediscovery Centre are working with more and more civic community sites where lots of paint come through these recycling centres, and the They're also supporting paint reuse schemes around the country. So this particular project is increasing nationally, and it's a circular project. Just moving on to another project. This is on Mahil Roher. There are many greenways popping up around the country. Cycling obviously is key as we move towards reducing our carbon footprint. But this project, again, working with local authorities and recycling centres. So they're taking old bikes and they're sandblasting and powder coating, using powder coating technology to create pretty much as new bikes. Also, as part of that and part of circular economy in general, training and upskilling is really important, and that is part of this particular project. This other project is Paltech. So Paltech, this demonstration project, they took plastic waste to make a pallet, and they're also currently working on an ongoing project where they're going to use plastic from farm plastic, ultimately, that's used as silage wrap to make a livestock drinker. And just, this is Paltech. Again, they've formed a partnership with Tesco. They unveiled there last week flower pots that are made from recycled plastic packaging. And just some other projects we have. This is project here is Irish Manufacturer Research. So it's an industrial symbiosis. So ultimately, waste from Penetico food could be used as a resource by St. Mel's Brewery. So waste bread utilises a substitute for virgin malted grain to create a new beer. And that beer can be purchased on St. Mel's Brewery, and it is actually not too bad. I tried it myself, so it's very much a circular and really interesting project. And just to mention briefly another couple of projects, Irish Fish Canners. So you probably be familiar with John West Salmon, and just a high level outcome from their project is ultimately their project led to a 14% reduction in fish waste at their facility. We also work with textiles and charity shops, again in upskilling, and one particular project that strikes out is during the pandemic, they were using textiles to make face masks. And as I said, it's a wide variety of projects, green enterprise projects. So Gannon Eco, they have a construction site in Kilbeggan, so they're identifying and testing suitable construction and demolition waste streams for use in concrete product. And another project is furniture recycling. They're upskilling end-of-life mattresses for insulation and other products. Just to quickly mention on the financial side of Green Enterprise, so we use Smith & Williamson, who look after the budgetary element of this. Ultimately, it's taxpayers' money that's been spent here, and 650,000 is quite a substantial amount. We provide 25% funding up front, and then the rest is on reimbursements and cost statements. Technical progress support and final outputs are required as part of the project. As I mentioned at the start, there's plenty of doom and gloom around the environmental news, but I think with Green Enterprise there is a good news story. Probably what we can improve on, I think, in the EPA is getting that good news story out there. So what we've started doing is doing webinars where at the end of projects we have dissemination events. So we have 2 webinars per year where the lead project, the project leads come in and give a webinar and talk about their projects, their outputs and outcomes. So I'll just finish up by just saying that our Green Enterprise call, as I mentioned, is going out next week. We're looking for projects within the 50,000 to 100,000 range, the 7 thematic areas. If you have any questions, you can ask me later, but email me at any time, CEP for Circular Economy Programs, so CEP@epa.ie. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for that, Joe. That was really interesting, and I love, like, personally, to hear more about those projects myself, and to see how they're getting on, and kind of what are the outcomes of the funding as that you guys have provided. I suppose your presentation demonstrates the impact of the Green Enterprise Programme. And I think as consumers ourselves, we're probably a lot closer to using products that are part of the circular economy than we might even realise. And I might come back to that then in the Q&A later at the end of the presentation. We've already got a couple of questions in for you, so don't go anywhere, stay around for the Q&A.
Perfect.
But I will move over now to Eddie. There's his presentation up there now. So next we have Eddie Conroy. So Eddie is County Architect at South Dublin County Council. Eddie has over 30 years experience in the local authority sector and has worked on a broad range of design projects in areas such as housing, public buildings and urban design. Eddie joins us today as the project lead for the Tallaght District Heating Project, which is an innovative solution demonstrating circular thinking in its approach. So before I hand over to Eddie, I just want to remind everyone to submit your questions and answer, or your questions even, into the chat box, and we'll put them to our presenters at the end of the session. So over to you, Eddie, if you're ready to go.
Jade, good afternoon, everybody. I suppose I'm talking today about the reuse of waste heat and turning that waste heat to account as a low carbon, low cost source of spatial heating for public buildings and ultimately for people's homes. If we could just go on to the next slide on. Why are we talking about heat at all? I suppose in terms of it's one of the largest energy users and the generator of carbon in the country, as you can see on the charts there. And I suppose if you think about this whole problem of our what mentioned there by the last speaker about our target for 2030, as a council, we're very committed to that. We've already met our targets for 2020, and we've moved on to the new target now, 50% saving for 2030. And heat was one of those things that we had to think about. I suppose if you think about the country overall, our bets are on the grid, and if we can get the grid to 80% renewables, as we're talking about, it's a vehicle for the other sectors. Now you can see the three biggest users in the country after energy is transport, spatial heating and agriculture. And in a way, we're interested in the electrification of transport through electric vehicles and public transport, and also then the electrification of heat, the integration of heat with electrical platforms. So next slide, please. How this is done. For years, we've been involved in this. Our first Sustainable Energy Action Plan was in May 2013, and the mechanisms for those are about recording, which is the development of data, how much heat we need and how much energy we need and how much carbon we generate. And then the idea of reducing all of those. And then when we get them down to a certain level, the idea of replacing them with renewable sources. On to the next one. And in terms of heat, the best and the most efficient way, as our friends in Scandinavia have known for over 100 years, is the idea of linking renewable heating and district heating. Now, I'm sorry to say we were up until all the talks I've done until a while ago, we were number 2 in the worst in Europe, but in fact now we've topped the poll as the worst in terms of renewable heat, and we're kind of very keen on getting off the bottom of that table. Onto the next one, please. And on this, we have to think about, initially we had to think about heat sources. Where can we get heat to put into this district heating? Up until now, even in Scandinavian countries, up until now, people burn things effectively to make heat, normally attached to industry or power generation, but frequently to do with coal. So it's not always clean, but one of the things we can do here is make sure that we don't involve it in the burning of anything, and we're using electricity in a way to generate this. And so it's a very interesting, this idea of fourth generation schemes use waste heat, and they also use heat pumps. So it's of interest even to the Scandinavian countries, these new projects that we're doing here. The red dots show where in the Dublin area we can get goodly amounts of waste heat. On to the next one. And again, you have to match the heat with the demand, you have to match the seller with the customer. And again, the redder it is on this, the more heat's needed. And you can see that 70% of Dublin region heat demand is suitable for being addressed by district heating. So it's quite high, and 86% of the city heat demand is suitable. So the Dublin city itself. So the region is 70% because it's more suburban. It's not as dense as the city, but the centre of the city itself is 86%. So it's quite suitable for this technology. And really, it's not a technology. It's kind of a platform for different technologies. Okay, on to the next one. Tal itself used to be a village. Then it was a village with the Square shopping centre, and now it's a town of between 80 and 90,000 people. And we've been since the start, when South Dublin County Council was formed in 1994, we've been interested in taking old car parks and underused industrial buildings and turning them into a dense urban fabric, and then and increasing population near the centre of the town. You can see that's our office on the bottom left-hand side there. 2,000 people live in those couple of blocks adjoining. Can we go on to the next one? And part of the success in doing this has been about laying networks over what was a very low density world. So you can see on the left hand side there, one of the networks is pedestrian and cycle. That's the same on the right hand side. And then there's transport networks like Lewis, and then there's public realm networks to encourage people out of cars, children to walk to school, all of those things, in the series of public squares that we've been developing in the centre of town. And we continue to do that. Another network is to do with fibres and data, and then the last and newest network is to do with heat. Okay, on to the next one. And when we did this initially, we were looking for a heat source. There was a brand new Amazon data center being built in the centre of Tala. We spoke to Amazon and Adzil, its Irish affiliate, and they agreed to give us the heat for free and to give us a site for the building of an energy centre. Next slide, please. You're all familiar with the arguments about the amount of energy used by data centers, but and we were interested in the opposite. They were previously just all their waste heat was going straight out into the sky. We're collecting all of that now. Okay, on to the next one. And how we started this was on the top left-hand side, and the kind of pink thing up there is the Amazon data center. And then we have a series of big buildings around here. And in a way, it's very hard to start district heating with small residential things. It's got substantial investment in civils and pipework and in energy, heat pumps, that type of thing. So what you need is a couple of big customers, and for choice you need a low cost source of the heat. As of now, we're using recycled waste heat. Into the future, we're starting to work now on geothermal exploration, and we're very suitable for that. So we'll move on to an even more low carbon solution with that. But you can see there on the right hand side, savings when we finish the first phase of this, which will be finished in about 2 months time, we'll be saving so anywhere between 1,400 and up to 1,600. We're now calculating tons a year. It's quite an amount. And if you just go on to the next one. It's a very simple system initially. The top circle there is the data center. We collect the heat from them. We lay 2 sets of pipes. The one on the left goes down to our building here, 12,500 square meters of office, library and civic theatre. And then on the right hand side, the main campus building for what used to be IT Tal and now the Technological University of Dublin. On to the next one. And this is where it kind of gets interesting. I know it's the most boring slide, so apologies, but we had to kind of invent a district heating sector. And first thing we had to do was form a company. That's the South Dublin District Heating Company. It's owned entirely by South Dublin County Council. It's the first public heat utility in Ireland, although they were common up until the 1950s. Locally in small towns and cities in Ireland, but it's the first new modern one. Its mission is to promote a lower carbon bracket circular economy in South Dublin County Council, but we've started with the idea of heat as a target that's well worth moving towards. So we've set this up. And the next thing we needed after that was heat. And you see there up at the top, the recycled heat supply that comes from the data center. And we had to develop a heat supply agreement with them. They don't charge us for it. And we have a kind of an agreement rather than a contract with the Amazon, and they give us the heat for free. And they've spent considerable amount of money putting in the heat recovery into their own building. and they've given us a little site that used to be, their site was the Jacobs Biscuits factory, and the Jacobs workers had a little social building at the end, and our energy centre has replaced that little social building. So one community facility is being replaced by another. There's a certain kind of elegance and recycling in that itself. So we had to agree a new heat supply agreement. Then this had to be worked out, complex legal thing. And then after that, we needed someone who knew what they were doing on this. We're a local authority. We've no experience in this. So we went to Europe. We had a tender process, and that tender was based on a company that would design, build, operate, and then maintain this system. And the winners of that competition, which was a kind of a green procurement where the outputs were not just cost, but also quality and low carbon and efficiency, were a company called Fortum. They're a multinational from Finland, and they're very interested in the 4G renewable electric based system that we have using waste heat, particularly using data center heat, because that's an area where they're also involved. And so they came on board with us, and again we had to work out a contract with them, how we do that, how they ran the construction site here with us, and that's nearly finished now. We've been causing mayhem on roads and things, digging them all up, but anyway, the people have been very patient, and we're nearly finished, and we'll be pushing heat by the end of August. So that was another contract, and then we had to get customers, and we had to work out a heat supply contract with them and heads of terms. That's all now underway, and we've now begun to expand from our phase one and starting to look at other customers, including residential customers. On to the next slide, please. This is kind of another slide that just shows you what happens is that the heat comes out of the data center at 23 degrees. We lift it through heat pumps to 85 degrees. It's pushed around the town at 85 degrees, and then it goes into the buildings here. And it's a very simple technology. It's like the radiator on your car. There's a heat exchanger inside the building, and your water stays inside, our water passes through and heats up. So it's an elegant and simple system, but it's got its own kind of challenges. On to the next slide, please. That's the energy center building. It's kind of a little green structure at the end of a massive data center, which is a kind of a gray and black and white building. So our one will be lit at night. It's done in zinc scale, so it has a kind of a handmade quality to it. So it kind of is like a little ornament at the end of the street, and it'll be, as I say, it looks different than all the other things around it, and we wanted to suggest that. It'll also give information on the skin of the building at night time about data or carbon that's being saved, and data about the energy usage. On to the next one, please. And we've set up the company, so we have some branding. Now, we've only got a couple of customers, so I'm more likely to be buying that plastic hat than that electric fan, but time will tell. So you can see it there on the branding and on the thing. So it's to get people interested in. It's supposed it's to suggest that the forward-looking notion of this company. On to the next slide. And in the centre of this is a kind of an innovation quarter that we're doing, which is taking old industrial buildings in the centre of Tallaght and changing them around. So on that one there, you can see it's going to have an innovation centre building. We can go on to the next slide, please. And it's going to have affordable apartments. We're building 133 affordable apartments. These will be powered by the district heating. And on to the next slide. And then there's a new Tallaght Innovation Centre, which is for tech startups. And again, this will be powered by it, and hopefully some of the startups will relate to renewable technologies. On to the next slide. And again, we've started to deal with, now we're talking with a scheme of 325 houses, another scheme of 540, and these are all apartments, and again they sit in the centre of Tallaght. That's why the densification, consolidation of urban, and the networks again laid down on these. You can see it in there, the networks of open space, the networks of cycle routes, and then over the whole thing, the network of heat and data. Okay, on to the next slide. And works, it says here works underway, but that work's actually nearly complete. All of those pipes are all buried now, and the Green Energy Centre is almost finished. So I suppose in terms of what we'll achieve at the end, it'll be the first of its kind. it's going to be, we've done a series of templated documents that we'll be able to use, and it gives everybody confidence that it's possible to do this. And in a way, it's a pilot project for much larger projects, such as the incinerator in town for DCC and for the Grangecorman campus, which is taking this technology and is going to use it in the centre of the city as well. Okay, I think that's it. Thanks, Jade.
Thanks a lot, Eddie. Every time I hear you speak, I can't admit to being an expert in this at all, but every time I hear you speak, I become more interested and enthused by what you're doing out in South Dublin. It's really, really interesting, really innovative, really transformative. And again, the impact of it, I'd say a lot of people don't even realise that it's happening when they're using these council buildings or the site. So really, really fascinating stuff. And again, we've a couple of questions coming in for you, so we'll come back to you at the Q&A. So last but by no means least, we're going to hand over to Aisling Folan, who is Creative Reuse Director with Recreate. So Aisling has a background in the fashion and textile industry and has held the position of Head of Creative Programming and Event Management with Recreate for the last 2 years. Aisling has a passion for supporting and empowering people through creative reuse and will now share with us how Recreate does this. So off you go, Aisling. You're on mute there? Yeah.
Can you hear me? Brilliant. And you can see the slides, can you? Okay, had some tech issues this morning, so just to be sure. So it's great to be here this afternoon. There's some amazing innovative stories there. A lot of food for thought there, and my mind is racing. So I'm here just to talk a little bit about Recreate, who we are and how we've been moving more towards a more sustainable and circular mindset in terms of our business and our interactions. So there's a complexity to what Recreate has to offer, a complexity and a circularity. And our mission, I suppose, sits at the crossroads of creativity, social inclusion and sustainability. We're a social enterprise, and I guess the nature of social enterprises is that they're a circular business model. When you look at this here, that you can see that how what we do in our business, though part funded by funding and also traded income, provides a service to the community, an innovative creative enterprise, and it's built upon a passion for helping people creatively. And that's just to set a backdrop to who we are, because I think sometimes there's questions about what is a social enterprise. Is it a charity? Is it fully funded? We're all of those things and so much more. So our particular social enterprise is centered around the concept of creative reuse. So Recreate was set up about 9 years ago, and what we do is we encourage the public to reuse materials on an industrial scale that would normally end up in landfill in all kinds of creative and inventive ways. So for the first 7 to 8 years, we found with the materials that we had that they were critical enablers in terms of creative expression, art practices, working with young children, people with special needs, and in schools and in both primary and secondary schools. But since then, we've developed what we're doing and who we're working with as well, and we're trying to move the creative reuse concept and core of our business into a more sustainable and circular mechanism. So COVID was the perfect kind of storm. When I started as creative director, COVID hit, I think, a week later. So my job changed immediately. There was a lot of innovating and creativity involved in pivoting that, which is the case for many businesses across the country. As well as that, we had a new CEO come in with a new perspective and a background in arts and community. In Recreate, we called the CEO the Chief Imagination Officer, because imagination and innovation is at the core of what we do. And the person at the top, if that feeds down the imagination and the innovation and also the curiosity, which I'll talk about in a moment. But during this time, we really focused on developing the skill of curiosity as a business and a team. We had to iterate and innovate all the time. we had to change our business model. The Recreate business model is a membership organization where people pay to become a member and then can come traditionally to take as much as they want for the projects they're doing. But during COVID, obviously, people couldn't come into the warehouse. We couldn't operate in the normal traditional way, so we had to really think on our feet and change. So that forced us to look at our offer and how to add value to it, and how we were operating as a business. So we did various things like create personal shopping service, curated materials delivery, themed boxes for particular activities for families, for schools, for community groups, and created a whole library of online content. So really during COVID and all those changes and challenges, we really just we turned the, you know, we really looked at ourselves. We really kind of examined what we were doing and asked the questions of like, what else, or what if, or what else can we offer? How else can we add value? How can we make a more sustainable impact? How can we keep going as a business? And really, that the whole focus then really like, although our business was always centered on the materials that we took in, we really started to rethink about how we could lengthen the life of the material through creative reuse, and then in line with the circular economy, bring the interconnectedness of people and materials to life. So in doing that, our curiosity in that way is what really drove our changes and our innovation during this time, and ever since. And I think, you know, the question of innovation, a word by any other word, it is imagination, it is curiosity, it is questioning all the time. And there is there, you know, as I've highlighted, the business case for curiosity, we stand to that by creating a culture of curiosity at that time when it was very difficult to be in business, and some people might have been afraid to change. We embraced the change, and it drove our innovation and our sustainable vision. So as a business, we moved from a transactional one where people would come, get the materials, leave, and do whatever they wanted to do with it, to a more transformational and experiential business. So by transforming our social enterprise from the transactional transformative, this was done through creative sustainable programs and by creating new job opportunities. So we've evolved as a company by interrogating our business model and dissecting our practice. And to innovate sustainability, we've taken apart and begun to rebuild the enterprise in a new way. Recreate has used the mechanism for the circular economy to recreate lives through new, longer-term socially inclusive programs and professions. And I will share some case studies that highlight this in a few moments. But how business has changed and how our lives have changed has really pushed us as a social enterprise to be more entrepreneurial and more creative than ever. So we're under reconstruction. We are constantly changing and innovating. We're looking at how we've used our materials and how we could use them better. We're looking at how our materials can inform and transform our social inclusion program and our job creation. And the circular economy really is the driving force for the creation of new jobs that we have in Recreate at the moment, and hope to continue to build from there. Oh, I've gone the wrong way. Sorry about that. And we've done this through the discipline of kind of building breakthroughs through the curiosity model, through the innovation. And I've just put this slide together to kind of highlight the areas where we have changed and innovated. Like our branding is under reconstruction. Our sorry, this is jumping all over the place. Apologies. Our branding is under reconstruction. Our customer engagement has changed. As I said, you know, we have more online services, more online video engagement, and live Zoom workshops. Those started during COVID, and we've reached on a sectoral level in terms of childcare further than we could have before by providing those online. Our product system has changed. We're looking at we would have been a more process-led organization before, and we still are in terms of creativity, because creativity and innovation is a process that needs to be followed, trialed, and iterated. But we're also looking at what types of products that we can now produce with the volume of materials that we have in our warehouse. Again, I mentioned earlier, we are reliant somewhat on funding, but we really have pushed our traded income through all the changes that we've made through the new kind of sustainable approach. We've expanded our networks and we've created new partnerships throughout COVID as well, and that has continued since. So really, we're innovating every minute of every day. And all of these changes have contributed further to what Recreate can do towards the Sustainable Development Goals. So I won't read through them all, but just to highlight that, you know, in terms of good health and well-being, the creation of dignified jobs and creative programming in early years has led to the creation of new enterprises. Quality education, our workshops are now less one-off and more programmatic, between 6 and 8 weeks, so that you can embed a more sustainable mindset and then imbue behavioural change. Obviously, new work and new jobs, new job roles is our new creative way of doing business. And in having a dedicated social inclusion department, it's also reducing inequalities in the workplace. We're all the time thinking creatively and wanting to create a creative community, encourage creative thinking so that the children of today don't have to change a mindset in 20 years' time. It's already embedded. And through the work that we do through our programming related to climate change, about responsible consumption, we're doing that. And I'll highlight that in the case study in a minute. But really, strategic partnership goals have been at the core of this change as well, which has fed into our programming and long-term sustainable solutions to material reuse. So really, our work at the moment has been and will continue to be focused on the reduction of consumption and reducing what is consumed by using what's already in existence can increase creativity and innovation. By getting inventive with what's already in existence, we've created new jobs and we've created new creative programs. But on an individual level, any person at this talk or at home can ask themselves, I have this stuff around me, what else can I do with it? You know, before I chuck it, before I get rid of it, what else can this be? And on a very basic level, in one of the first questions we ask in our workshops, in our programs and webinars is, this is A, but what else could it be? And it's to get the innovative, creative thinking going in minds. So really, that invention piece has really fed into how our material resources continually feed innovation. So it is a material world. Our world in Recreate is certainly a material one, and we're always looking for new ways to use the materials. The slide you see here is a backpack that we had designed from Ikea sofa covers. So we received, I can't even remember the kilo amount of it, but a huge amount of, Ikea is one of our key suppliers. We received a whole load of this particular grey cover. It wasn't particularly popular. It's actually a really nice fabric, but people see grey and they don't go for it. So during COVID, we had quite a lot of quantities of this. So we started thinking about what else could this be? So this is an example of what else an IKEA sofa cover could be. And this was the creation of a Curious Explorer backpack that we wanted, but we were trialing at the time to see if we could put our materials into that. And then have children always, you know, have their little curious backpack or their little exploration provocation pack on their back. And in doing so, we created new partnerships at the time. We got together with a fellow social enterprise called Attention Attire, and we piloted a program funded by the Community Foundation and the EPA. By combining two social enterprises, we brought circular thinking together, commonalities in terms of what we wanted to do with surplus materials, and then a whole new partnership, which led to the FACE adaptation, creativity and environment pilot. So you'll see here 3 examples of jackets on the mannequins, and then the creators of the jackets modelled by the designers in the photograph. So these are students from Dean's Rath Community School in Clondalkin. We ran the pilot with them before and after Christmas, and it was a fantastic experience for us, and it was a great first in terms of how we partnered with Attention Attire. Attention Attire are, if you don't know them, are a social enterprise that prior to COVID, at the end of festivals, went around and collected tents that were left over that people discarded afterwards, and took them away and then remade them into zero waste fashion items. So during COVID, we, different supports for social enterprises like the CRNI had lots of different meetings, and I met Attention Attire at that. And it just was a kind of a no-brainer where they didn't have any tents. They couldn't continue making their fashion line, but we had a warehouse full of materials. And I said, why don't you come along and see what materials we have and what else could be used instead? So what started out as a supportive two enterprises coming together to survive turned into this fantastic program that was funded by the EPA and the Community Foundation to show how you can combine enterprises and resources to create a zero waste fashion collection. So the materials that were used were twofold. So one were the Ikea, you'll probably recognize some of them there, the Ikea flags, advertisement flags that hang outside Ikea. They're a very like Airtex type fabric, very kind of cool and sporty look about them, which inspired the idea for the jackets. And then also the more silk, colorful, shiny based ones are actually set backdrops from Virgin Media. So Virgin Media were revamping and changing how they did their sets, and they asked us would we take them. So we did, and we deconstructed the set, took the fabric off it, and then offered it to the students to use to create these jackets. And then from there, a fashion collection was created by them. None of them had ever sewn before. Attention Attire brought the sewing skills training. We brought the materials and the creative thinking. Each session was kick-started by a curious conversation, a climate chat, debating circularity, talking about reducing consumerism, to really highlight what those words meant to them and what they mean in real terms, and that, being circular and reusing can be really cool, and it can be quite empowering. So as you can tell, I really enjoyed that project, and we're now looking at hopefully we'd love to pilot it across the country. We'd love every TY year across the country to have this program, because I think through doing and taking part and learning like tangibly, it stays and changes mindsets for longer. It has a more lasting impact. So it's an example of an innovative partnership and future project, and we're hoping to start a kind of a sustainable movement, and maybe even a face festival by next year, where everyone could come along and show off their face collections. So the other thing we're trying to do is embed creative sustainability within the early years, because as I touched on earlier, if we can start now by talking or behaving circularly, then we won't have to kind of backtrack and revisit mindsets and change them when we're all adults and too stuck in our ways to change them. So what we're really doing now is moving from a take and make mechanism that we would have had before, in terms of early years services could come to us, they could take the materials and then they could do something with them. Now we're providing a vision for an early years setting that's nearly built from reuse materials, indoor and outdoor environments of provocations. We're looking at, actually, if you look in this slide here, you'll see that this was a creative reuse project we did for Crinunanog this time last year, where we built an outdoor classroom based on the design of children across South Dublin in the type of school that they would want to see, and really putting the voice of the child and the future into this. And this is what we built. This bed is a day bed that the children wanted to see in their school for, rest, mindful times. But in the background, you'll see that eye wall, and that's the set I referred to about the FACE program. That's the same material being used there as a wall in the middle of Tala to create an outdoor classroom that was used to make the jackets in the FACE program collection. So it's that circularity, like each one feeds into the next. But really what we're trying to do in this big project that we did with Tala, with children, with schools, is to then dissect that, pick that apart, and see what elements of that we could bring to the sector. So now, instead of just take, make, and go and do whatever with the children, now we're now providing creative support, creative consultation with childcare settings and working with childcare committees. And at the weekend, we were up in Monaghan with the National Child Care Network, and there's a real move and a real shift there as well in terms of green play and outdoor environmental mindsets in the early years. And it just makes sense. And if we can do it at that stage, we can have a whole new creative circular community in no time. And the other thing that we're doing and we have done is creating new jobs to really transform social inclusion and our approach to it, to move away from tokenistic maybe TY jobs, for a few weeks, to now more meaningful, transformative job creation. So we've worked with the prison services, and through government funding, we've recently hired 2 women who are ex-prisoners. We connected with the prisons. We really had created conversations and digging into what skills were in the prisons, what people were there that could benefit our social enterprise and add to the rich tapestry of people that we have working there. So just last week, we hired an amazing woman with stunning skills in terms of making frames and recreating from reused materials, and she's now going to be our creative reuse maker. And it's a whole new job that we never had before that we've created, and we'll have another person joining us in a couple of weeks' time. So it's a really exciting time for us, and that circularity of and that sense of like material that are that's been disregarded, or people that maybe have forgotten about, that there's potential that can be brought together circularly in terms of what we're doing and recreate at the moment. So it's a really exciting time. So really heading into our 3rd year of change, but our 10th year in business, we really want to continue these curious conversations and partnerships. We really want to branch out and work with new people and basically combine resources, combine skills, and move forward towards a more circular society in Ireland, and continue to disrupt the make-take model, and to remain as sustainable as we possibly can in the social enterprise that we have. Thank you.
That's brilliant, Aisling. Thanks a lot for sharing that presentation. Really, really interesting. And I love how you ended there about disrupting your own kind of model, and how you started off as a kind of take and make organization yourselves, but have kind of transformed. I really, really love that. And I also love the whole idea of kind of becoming that early years consultant and starting young and starting from the outset, and then hopefully, introducing those circular behaviors to kids, and then kind of seeing how that evolves. Really, really interesting presentation. A couple of questions in for you as well. So thank you to Joe, Eddie and Aisling for their excellent presentations. I'm going to jump to the Q&A. We only have a little bit of time, and I don't know if I'll get through all the questions, but we'll try our best. I suppose, Joe, we might start off with you because we've had a couple of questions in on this one, and it's actually in relation to the funding programme itself. So I have 3 questions that I'm gonna throw at you there. The first one is in relation to kind of the project funding. Are projects funded 100%, or are organisations expected to, I suppose, contribute to that or match fund, or how does that work in terms of the programme?
Yeah, thanks. Sorry. Yeah, thanks, Jade. Ultimately, it depends on the type of organisation you are. There's various different categories. So if you're a public entity, it's funded up to 95%. If you're a small to medium enterprise, it's 75%, and if you're non-SME, it's 50%. When the call goes out next week, on our Green Enterprise webpage, we will have what we call a technical description document, and that ultimately outlines what is defined as an SME, non-SME, public business entity, and it provides more details on the amount of funding, but it's up to 95%.
Okay, brilliant. And what we might do after the session, when we send out the link to the recording, we might send out the link to your own kind of website pages then, so people can keep an eye on them over the next couple of weeks. Because I think you probably just answered to the next questions that we got in. Is the fund open to state agencies, and is the fund open to social enterprises?
Yeah, and yes to both. Yeah.
Yeah. Brilliant. So yeah, we'll definitely send around that information on your website and get people to keep an eye on it if they're interested in applying.
Great.
I'll ask Eddie a question next. So I suppose, Eddie, you mentioned about starting a sector when you're introducing this district heating solution. What are the opportunities to scale this to other areas? I think you mentioned 70% of the Dublin region is kind of this could work in those areas if I picked that up correctly. So what opportunities are there for other local authorities or other interested groups maybe to take on this project in their own areas?
Yeah, I suppose there are good opportunities. Dublin generates more waste heat than it actually needs to solve its heating problem. Now, it's not a straightforward business of collecting it in a bucket or something, but as you can imagine, but in reality, there's huge sources of waste heat that are currently generating huge amounts of carbon, and they come from different sources. Refrigeration is a common one in meat plants, all that. Industry, electric, the generation of electric power. There's a whole series of things generates heat. So it's possible once you have a heat source that you can start a network. After that, you need customers, and again, if you can get one good big customer, it's very good to generate the thing. If you have a couple, it becomes very doable. And then after that, once you have that working, it becomes possible then to start delivering it to homes and to other users and schools and hospitals and all of this kind of thing. So the mechanism is there. We were very lucky. We had to start. We have a small, neat little scheme, and we were funded by the EU initially, about €750,000, and we put about 1 million ourselves into it, and then the rest of it has come from the Department of Environment and Climate Change. So people are interested in it. There's models for it all over, particularly Scandinavia, but all over Europe and Eastern Europe. So there are opportunities to scale, but what you do need is you need a certain density of development, so that the pipes don't have to be too long, and the more things can come off each meter of pipe, the better it is. And then you need heat that doesn't cost very much, because if you have to deal with it and push it around and it's still costing you a lot of money, you can't sell it at a relatively good value. And hopefully you'll have a technology that will reduce carbon as well. So I was saying earlier on about the one we have eats carbon where it lives, and then it also it uses the waste heat pumps in a very, very efficient way. Ours is like 320% efficient, which is fantastic use of electricity. And at night time, for instance, you can use it as well for after 12 o'clock. The heat effectively, the heat pumps can run very, very cheaply. So all of those things are available to everybody, but strong nerves are required, and it's easier for local authority to start because they control planning and they know about things coming ahead. And we've been pushing around cold water for about 150 years. So it's not such a big ask to start pushing around hot water instead. So that there's some kind of advantages to that. But other companies are interested in it. When we went on the tender that time, we got 4 or 5 multinational companies were interested in doing district heating in Ireland and made very, very detailed bids and very substantial offers. So we were very lucky with the Finns because they're countries around the same scale as here, and they have an affinity with the kind of Irish world and the respect for nature and sustainability, the ambitions. So we were lucky, but it's everywhere. People are interested in it, and the technologies are developing all the time. So the answer is yes, scalable, and yes, doable.
Excellent. And I know you had said as well that you have your templates and you have your documents, and you're probably more than willing to share all of that as much as you can anyway with other local authorities or anyone else who's keen to get interested.
Yeah, again, that's one of the advantages, for instance, of us as a public body, like, and my time, all of that. I'm public servant, so people are paying my wages, and so we're happy to be involved in that. And we've done these. There's template contracts and there's template things, and there's obviously all the details of it are they're complex enough, but the actual structures of them, how the contracts work, and the logic of the company and how it's been set up, all of that's available, and it's kind of we were thinking about that as we were doing it.
Okay, Brilliant. So it's kind of that build to share model that exists within the local authorities. You know, you're thinking of the sharing at the outset then, and
Yeah, it's
sharing
kind of a
policy.
mechanism for us and all the different authorities,
Yeah.
and there's 34 local authorities, and they're
Yeah.
structured to spread things around between them.
Yeah, brilliant. And I suppose that kind of collaboration piece with yourself and your colleagues then leads on to a question I have for Aisling, and something that's kind of come through in the Q&A. Collaboration was very clearly identified as something that you do really, really well in Recreate. And you mentioned a lot about, I suppose, suppliers and strategic partnerships. And you know, businesses that might be getting rid of product or have surplus product. How does that work in terms of developing those strategic partnerships? Do they approach yourselves and say, listen, we've got these flags, or do you kind of identify areas where you might see potential waste and make kind of outreach to those companies? How does that kind of partnership model work?
Yeah, I suppose it's a combination of both there, Jade. Traditionally, I suppose in the beginning we would have reached out to particular suppliers, and we have long-term suppliers that have been with us from the beginning. But then I suppose as the years have passed and there's different trends of materials coming in, there'll be certain things that we would like more of, or we would like to reach out to people to find out. So we're actually in the process of kind of looking at how we strategically partner with new suppliers at the moment and how that works. And we're looking at because there's a lot of value in, and also it's also economically sustainable to get rid of the material, the excess waste. Like, it's all perfectly good, maybe slightly flawed materials, and it makes more sense for them to give them to us. They save costs in terms of waste, although I don't like using the word waste. I called it resources, but and that's how that works. So we're now looking at how we can maybe work in terms of CSR, and maybe new companies coming on board might want to sponsor a new FACE program or a new early years purposeful play program in a particular area, and then that way the supplier then is giving back to the wider community by also contributing to our social enterprise. And with that in mind, again, it's more of a circular way of working with the suppliers that benefits them and us.
Yeah, brilliant. And I'm conscious of time and that we've kind of gone over a little bit, so I might just ask you one last quick question each, and then we'll wrap up. And this is being recorded, so if anyone had to drop off, they can fast forward to watch the Q&A. But while I have you, Aisling, we actually got a question in from somebody looking to know if there are opportunities to volunteer with Recreate in a policy or strategic concept, in a context even. They said it would be great to get involved in this capacity. So do you take on volunteers, or how do you?
We do, yeah, we do take on volunteers for sure. So that person could contact me, obviously, or contact Liz Smith, our social inclusion development officer, who would look after the volunteer end of things in Recreate. So no, we absolutely do take volunteers on, yeah.
Okay, well,
I appreciate all of them, yeah.
Yeah, hopefully you might get a couple now out of this, and that's brilliant.
Recruits.
Yeah, absolutely. Joe, I might come to you for one last question. In terms of the paint project that I'm really interested in, I actually visited the Rediscovery Centre yesterday and saw the paint workshop at the paint facility in action, and I was then able to see the paint for sale and an excellent selection of colours as well, which I was very surprised about. So it's a really brilliant project. Do you see the opportunity for that to kind of be scaled around the country, or how's that kind of working at the moment in terms of scaling?
Absolutely, and as far as I'm aware, it is being scaled up. It's been, I think they're trialing it down in Cork and in Galway. So I think there's huge potential there for sure in scaling up this. It's why not? It works really well in the Rediscovery Centre. Why not in Cork and Galway and other major cities? I mean, if you saw the amount of waste paint that comes through these recycling centres, it's absolutely staggering. So I think absolutely, for sure.
Yeah, and I wasn't aware of the kind of how it gets destroyed essentially, and that we have to ship it out, and the huge costs involved in kind of
huge. Yeah, like I mean, ultimately, paint is managed as hazardous, and it is so expensive to get rid of, and a lot of most of it's exported and exported for incineration. So yeah, like I mean, it just makes complete sense to manage this waste at home. And it's fully circular, So yeah, it's a fantastic work that they're doing in the Rediscovery Centre, and I'd say it's going to be scaled up for sure.
Brilliant. And I think what would be really beneficial, because I know I saw it on the news a couple of weeks ago, and then when I visited the centre yesterday, the more people become aware then of these materials, you know, before yesterday it was just a half empty tin of paint in my press, whereas now I actually understand, oh no, this, you know, is going to be shipped across, or these guys can take it and kind of reuse it and repurpose it. I suppose the importance of comms and really letting people know what their products are.
And I think it goes further up the chain as well. I know the three West regions are doing a lot of work with the retailers, because what's happening is people are buying too much paint and they know that they don't need it and then have to get rid of it. So, you know, it's that waste prevention at the very start. If that can happen, that can be a great way of dealing with it.
Brilliant. So there's definitely a lot of collaborative partnerships and conversations with suppliers and businesses that's kind of coming through from this presentation. And that actually, I might wrap up with you then, Eddie, with a kind of a question on that. So obviously you're getting your heat waste from the data center. Is there anything else that you're getting from that partnership model then as well in the local area?
Yeah, we just had long discussions at the start with Amazon about the heat, and with their Irish team and with their American team, and as a result of that, we've established another initiative with them called Think Big Space. And what it is we have a building with Folan. Folan and ourselves in partnership with Amazon have set up this thing. It's an educational facility, and they've got them around Europe, but this is the first one in the Ireland and the UK. And what it is it's a series of kind of labs and technology rooms where kids can come together with children around the world. So we've had schools in regularly on this, and they do seminars, and Amazon provide very interesting seminars for the children. And we're currently working on the idea of it becoming a lab space as well, where they can do kind of live projects and making. But as of now, what they've done is they've linked them into interesting talks, and the kids can see each other and can do it, all related to the development of technology, interactive technologies, and the future of technology. So it's got a very interesting educational component that's traveled with this. And we've also managed to link Amazon with some centres out in West Hall as well, the Jazz Centre in West Hall. So they've got educational programs with them and with Citywise. So they have a social kind of dimension, which we touched on under the low carbon thing, but they also have things to do with fairness and sustainability programs that we've been able to capture. And then the second thing, I suppose, is that with TUD, they have it's a technological university, and for years the IT in Tallaght has prepared people to work in places like Intel and those, and they're very interested in the idea now of renewable heat as a sector, and putting on renewable heat courses. And we, in the building itself, the little energy building I showed you, we've got a training area in there where kids who are going to be studying this can come down and take live data from the information from the heat pumps as they're working and see about that. So both of them have led us into areas of innovation and training with big partners that will be able to continue into the future. So that was a thing we hadn't thought of really, but TUD are so keen that they've put the facilities manager from Grange Gorman is on our board now for the heat company. So we've kind of we've forged those links now, and they'll be long term.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting. What's kind of jumping out at me is, you know, the importance of making connections with people and seeing where those partnerships are. And I'm just thinking there, like Eddie, you're talking about Tallaght and you're talking about this the heat waste, and then it, you know, fueling businesses in the area. And then Aisling then talks about, you know, being an early years consultant to a business in Tallaght who might potentially be you know, using that kind of the heat waste, and it's all connected then, which is essentially, that is the circular economy then, and
That's all about.
it is. And geez, I've got goosebumps here thinking about it, but it's actually, it is beautiful to see it. It's beautiful to see it in real life, and kind of the connections that are being made, and the importance of that, and the importance of partnerships and collaborating and kind of talking to businesses. We shouldn't be scared of this, you know, we shouldn't be scared of, you know, waste or resources or whatever it is. We should be open to engage and get into conversations with people and find out how we can reuse and maybe reimagine new possibilities for our products and our resources that we have. So I've really enjoyed this session, I have to say, and it's been a pleasure to hear from the three different perspectives. So I'd like to thank Joe from the EPA, Eddie from South Dublin County Council, and Aisling from Recreate for those brilliant presentations on kind of circular economy projects that are happening in Ireland at the moment. And like I said, we will send out an email to all attendees, and I'll try and put as much information on your different projects and the different services and how people can reach out to yourselves, if that's okay. And yeah, I really thanks a lot for joining us, and I hope everyone enjoyed it, and we'll see you next month. So thanks a lot, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Millie.
Take care. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.